Now let's go ahead and wrap up our discussion on the advanced graph editing functions available in AutoTune Pro X. So first, we'll go ahead and dive into these editing tools that are available along the top. The editing tools help you interact with existing correction objects and to navigate the main graph view. We touched on some of these briefly, but these tools are going to be used all the time whenever you're editing more advanced sequences. So now that we kind of know how everything functions inside the software, we can really show off what these tools can do. So the first one is going to be this multi-tool, which is kind of our main selection tool. This has multiple different functions depending on what you're doing with it, and it's used to move and edit existing correction objects. So lines, curves, or notes, you select this tool, and then you use that to go in and edit those existing objects. And as you remember, whenever we're using this on things like curves, for example, whenever we're using the line tool, depending on what we're doing with the line, it'll switch its function based on what we have selected. So there's a variety of different purposes depending on the object that you're working on. So by default, I usually have this one on unless I'm using one of these more specific tools to edit something within the sequencer. So for example, we can click on this and edit this and move its position and change that note. Or if we had a line tool and we want to go through and actually create some sort of line and then go in and adjust it, we could use that editing tool. We could use the multi-tool to adjust these various different parameters inside of my line. So I could use that to sort of move around that pitch curve or whatever, depending on what I needed to do. One super helpful thing about this multi-tool is by default, it's going to be snapping to the different pitches. So you can see it's snapped to this note. I move this up, it's snap to this note. But if I want to adjust this by a fine-tune value, I can go ahead and hold Shift. Then it'll temporarily turn off that note snap. I can drag this down and really get a fine-tuned value here, or adjust that up, and it'll sort of move it off the grid here. And then I could use that to sort of fine-tune the values that I need for my pitches. We can also drag or extend the ends here to extend that note horizontally. So now this note extends into this next section. You can see it's going a little bit crazy here because this pitch is a bit different. But this is helpful if you have a note and it didn't quite get the whole note. So for example, right here, that start isn't included in this note. So go ahead and drag that over. So that way it gets that whole correction there. The next tool available is going to be the range tool. Drag the range tool inside the main graph view to select an area and to select any correction objects within that area. So I can go ahead and select multiple notes by just clicking and dragging. You can see now it has selected both of those options there. It also works down here on this waveform graph, which I find super helpful. So say, for example, you want to select the second half of this entire performance. I go ahead and select that. Now it's going to zoom in and then show me that I've selected those different notes. Depending on what value you have set here, either all or tie, it's going to go ahead and change its behavior. So for example, this one's going to kind of zoom around as I select things and to focus in on them. But usually I have all selected so I can see the entirety of the performance and then use this to kind of dial in the exact area that I need to select. Go ahead and zoom out. And that is the range tool. The next tool is the split tool. This will split a correction object, so either notes, lines, or curves. So depending on which view you're using here, here we have the notes, but if you're using the curves, it behaves the same way. And this will let you split existing notes. So this is super helpful, especially if you have a note that's kind of not being identified properly. So say, for example, at this end right here, you can see that it goes up quite a bit. So that's kind of letting me know that this is starting to move out of this pitch. So this is starting to move into a different note. So I could use the split tool to split that note. And then I can go ahead and take my multi-tool, select that. Maybe we could hold Shift and make sure that that individual note object is selected. And I could use that to kind of fine tune that exact note. So that way it's all sort of lining up at the right pitch. So the split tool is really, really helpful, especially when you're tuning more complex performances. You can grab individual sections that may be sort of moving up just a bit too much. You can grab them, slice them, and then move them into position. Then we have the zoom tool, which is used for quick navigation. Usually I just like to use my Max trackpad, but there are some different options here that can be helpful depending on the workflow that you like the best. But we can use this to kind of zoom in on given selections. Let's say, for example, I wanted to zoom in on just this section. I click, select, and then drag, and it's going to go ahead and zoom in on just those two notes. So it's helpful when you really want to dial into a specific section and edit just that section. And then I can either hold Alt or Option and then go ahead and scroll around to zoom out vertically. So I can go ahead and hit that, and then now it is zoomed out to my main view here. You can also use the Command or Control keys while scrolling up and down with your mouse or trackpad to zoom horizontally. So let's go ahead and zoom in to this note here. You can see that now it's zooming into that specific note, and this is actually getting wider as well. So it's just used for quick zooming and navigation. You can also use the pinch to zoom or any of these controls here along the bottom. The next tool is going to be the scroll tool. This is super nice if you don't want to mess around with these individual notes. You're just trying to move quickly throughout a performance and kind of find a section of audio. Whenever this is selected, I won't be able to select any of these individual clips or note correction objects, so that way you don't accidentally move things as you're scrolling around. Then from there, we have some new tools that we haven't covered yet, the timing tools. These are used to adjust the timing of your audio recordings. Now, if you're going to use these, make sure that you have it set up to pitch and time, not just pitch correction, so that way I can actually adjust the timing of my audio. The way that we scan this in, whenever we start talking about how to print everything into the sequencer, I use pitch and time, so that way all this is going to work, but make sure that that is actually enabled whenever you scan in your audio if you want to play around with the timing. So the first tool is going to be the point tool. This allows you to select a range of audio and then move a point within that range forward or backward in time, compressing and expanding the audio around it. So go ahead and select that tool, and then you need to select an audio range that you'd like to operate on. Let's go ahead and zoom in. Let's focus in on kind of this first section here. So go ahead and select that. So now it's going to go ahead and highlight that section. Maybe just use this little segment here. And then we can click and drag anywhere on this to go ahead and push and pull that selected region. So you can see now it's compressing and expanding that. So it's basically keeping the beginning of the performance to start here and the end to stop here, but it gives me the ability to really adjust how that performance is hitting within the selected area. Now this is a little bit more of extreme of a time stretch here. Usually you do this in smaller values. I'm just doing this for an example, but that gives you the ability to go in and really adjust that timing. Let's also go ahead and put that note back down to its default state. Okay, so that way it's playing the proper notes, so it's not distracting. But this gives us the ability to kind of push and pull that audio in time. Now, let's go ahead and undo that. And then let's go ahead and make sure that is at the proper note. So make sure that is on the multi-tool. There we go. Okay, and then we could show off the next tool, which is the region tool. The region tool allows you to select a range of audio and then move a whole region within that range. So it's kind of like this tool that sort of compresses and expands the entirety of the selection, but it's a little bit more detailed. So let's say we want to take this whole region, want to take this whole section here, and I want to take this element in my performance, make a secondary selection here, and then I don't want to affect the timing of this whole section here. I just want to kind of push and pull this within this area. So see this? Now whenever I'm adjusting this, it keeps the timing in the center section the same, but it's compressing and expanding the sections over here. I find this one's a little bit more practical because what I can do is I can use this to basically adjust just the start and end point of a performance. Let's say something's not quite exactly hitting on the right beat. I could take just the end bits there and kind of push or pull it just slightly depending on what I need. So that way the rest of the performance stays the same, but just that start and end points are changing just a little bit. So that's a really helpful tool if you want to go in and adjust the individual performance elements within your vocal. It just gives you some flexibility there to play around with your performance. Then after that, we have those nudge features, which are available over here. So I could use that to just nudge my audio up and down to quickly adjust the pitch of those correction objects. Then the last thing that we have that I want to cover is going to be the info view. So if we go ahead and click this, it's going to pop up this info view. The info bar is just used to get real-time information about the correction objects and everything inside of your main graph, just giving you a little bit more information depending on what you need to edit your given performance. Depending on what you need to edit your performance. So let's go ahead and just scroll over and see what this gives us. So the first one is going to be the clock value. So you can see down here at the bottom, this value clock right here. And what this does is during playback, it's going to show the current time position in minutes or seconds, or bars and beats, depending on how you have your time display settings. So right now we have this all set to a time display rather than bars and beats, but that can be configured inside the preferences, depending on what works best for you. So if I play this back, you can see right here that clock value is changing. So it's letting me know exactly where this is inside of my sequence. So that could be helpful, especially if you're trying to dial in something super specific. That way you can tell exactly where something is inside of your sequence. The next control is going to be the cursor. Basically, this just tells you where in time this whole sequence is. So if we go to 1 second, it's going to tell me that I am at 1 second right here. Next, we have the detected pitch, which is going to show the detected pitch of my audio. at the current cursor position in the main graph. Right now you can see where this is set. It's C3, -2, letting me know exactly where my cursor is set. If I was to move this around, you can see that that's now set to C3, depending on where we are inside that sequence. So that little bit of variation, that green line, so you can see right here that that is at C3 with -59 cents. That's just kind of giving me a bit of information about exactly where that line is. So that kind of helps more detailed correction if you're really trying to dial in a specific value. The next one is going to be the object control that's found right next to it. This is going to display the target pitch of the correction object or wherever the current cursor is set. So right now, that's letting me know that that is at C3. If I change this to a D, now it says D3 whenever I hover over that object. Thus, it's just letting me know where I have that object set to. And then we have the output right next to that, which is right here. This shows the current output pitch at the current cursor position in the main graph. So that readout includes the letter of the pitch, the octave number, and then the offset in cents. So right now this is really helpful because this lets me know that the output is C3 plus 3. So it's slightly out of tune. It's 3 semitones off. And this is just letting me know kind of where everything is. If I go ahead and hover over this section, that's up 3 semitones. If I hover over this section, that's down -12. So that's just letting me know exactly what that pitch is doing. So if I want to change the overall pitch of it to the exact pitch I want, I can use this to dial in some adjustments. The last thing available here is the input pitch, correction, and output pitch. This lets you know what the various different lines are in case you forget. Right now, with how I have this configured, we're only really seeing the output pitch because the visual interface can get quite cluttered if you have all of these different things enabled. So you can see our correction objects here in blue, the output pitch is in green, then the input pitch, if you have that configured, is going to appear red. But for me, I don't find that quite as useful because I only want to see what I'm actually adjusting to. So I just go ahead and turn that off in the preferences and then leave the visual interface just to show me the output pitch. But that just depends on how you want to set that up inside of your preferences. All right, so that is all for the advanced functionality of the AutoTune Pro plugin. There's a lot of different stuff here and lots of advanced and very detailed control options available. But this just gives you a high degree of customization whenever you're going through and auto-tuning your sounds. So depending on what you need, you can use the auto mode for more extreme pitch shifting effects if you want that classic kind of auto-tune or trap vocal sound. Then you could use the graph mode if you want to really dial in a specific performance and just adjust the tuning of that vocalist. So that wraps up this video, and that also wraps up this course. Hope you enjoyed the series of videos, and if you did, make sure to check out the other courses on Groove3's website for more music production, mixing, and mastering tutorials. Thanks for checking out the series. I'll see you in another course soon.